Now, happy to say Damien's with us. How are you?
Hey Joe, how are you? How you getting on?
Very well. Um, don't let Tony Adams influence what clothes you buy. Don't let them win.
You know what? It's an old reflex in football when you just immediately start with banter and like establish dominance and I think that's what he did. I'm so far out of football now, and I've tried my best to not do stuff like that because when you're in normal life and you meet someone new and you immediately start with something like that, you realize, oh, that's not the best way to start a conversation. So I almost had to retrain myself out of a football change room environment to like normal life because football humor is brutal, and the more brutal the better. And for him to call me a janitor right out the gate just took me a little bit by surprise.
I seem to remember you saying, I've just met you.
But I'm 6 years out of football. I know he's longer, but he obviously maintained those reflexes, whereas I've consciously retrained myself not to do stuff like that because I have met people for the first time and immediately come up with something similar, and they're just looking at me going, "That was uncalled for," and I've had to apologize straight away.
Re-civilize yourself.
And pretty much, yeah, pretty much.
Game of the weekend, I guess, was always going to be United Arsenal yesterday. 1-0 win Arsenal. Ruben Amorim on the performance. This was completely different from last season. We proved today we can win any game in the Premier League, especially against a great team like Arsenal. Are you going along with that was much improved on Manchester United's part?
Um, No, because I think there was times last year where they played well and didn't win games of football. And I think one thing for a football manager is when you're playing well and you're not winning, that's a huge concern because there'll be days like Arsenal had where you're not playing particularly well and you can still get wins, and that's how you become a successful team. It's worrying when you play well and you can't win. And the manager will be concerned about that. I think I read somewhere this morning now that Amorim has more losses than wins as a Manchester United manager. I think the record reads something like 16 wins, 10 draws, and 17 losses, something in and around that. That is concerning. Now, granted, the argument would be made that if we play like that against everyone else, we should pick up more points, but you're not going to play well every week. And Arsenal didn't play particularly well yesterday, but they got the result because of the two centre backs and the goalkeeper. The middle half of the pitch and the top half of the top third of the pitch, the midfielders and the attackers, I think was pretty brutal for Arsenal. They didn't play well, but their centre backs are bloody immense. I cannot heap enough praise on the two of them as a pairing. They have to be the best in European football, or certainly up there with the best. I think they're the best in the Premier League because for them to put in the performance they did, and then when you do manage to get past those centre backs, you got a goalkeeper, a world class goalkeeper waiting for you. So you can iron out the midfield and the forward. And I think once the season finds a rhythm and those midfield players find their rhythm and the attackers, they will score goals without doubt. But it's such a safety net to have those centre backs behind you. Whereas Manchester United are the opposite. You know, their goalkeeper got caught yesterday. I know we're going to get into that. I do have some thoughts on that. But the midfield done reasonably well. But again, I didn't see a huge amount of improvement. They've obviously improved with players insofar as Cunha and Mbeumo are going to cause problems. But it was still a bit of a disjointed, bitty performance.
Okay. Right. God, because I don't remember them playing that well very often last year. I know there's some good performances against bigger sides at certain stages,
Yeah,
but like when you take last year in their 38 league games, just 44 goals, and yesterday they got 22 shots off. Like Mount looked really good, and the two boys in Buomo and Cunha definitely like a massive improvement on Hoyland, and it wasn't like they were pinned back into a five, like they had a lot of the game. I,
yeah.
I, I sort of I did find myself having that thought of, oh, if they play like this against lots of other sides, dot dot dot.
Yeah, look, it was an improved performance. I did say at the start it was a little bit better. My worry for Manchester United is when they're not playing well, that midfield area is still a huge issue for them. Like you cut it whatever way you want. Fernandez and Casemiro in the middle of the park isn't going to cut it. A lot of Manchester United good play or chances were created from broken plays. You know, where Arsenal turned the ball over, or there was a hectic period in the game, and all of a sudden the ball just fell to Bruno Fernandez, and he whizzes one out to Mbuemo, and Arsenal's fullbacks are caught in an advanced position. Yes, they had a lot of possession, but that was around their own defensive area. It was an improved performance, but they still didn't win the game of football. And ultimately, that's what Manchester United have to start doing. That's what Ruben Amorim has to start doing. He has to start winning games of football. I know we're only one game in, but if he doesn't play well next week, or Manchester United don't quite, click in the manner that they did, because one thing you have to bear in mind is every team that's playing Manchester United the next couple of weeks will have their analysts pouring over Manchester United, and they might not commit their fullbacks as high. They might cut passes off to the wide players, because that's what analysts are doing. That's what teams are doing now. They're looking at Manchester United in that game and saying, what was their biggest strength? When the ball gets out to Mbeumo or Cunha, so all of a sudden they set up at a midfield that maybe cut those balls off, and you take away that. What else have Manchester United got then? Okay, Sesko is going to come into the team. Remains to be seen whether he's going to be as good as what people are hoping he's going to be. But you're going to look at that midfield, so you're going to take away Manchester United's strengths and try and limit them or minimise the effect they can have in a game. And then you look at that midfield and you're just thinking, Casemiro lumbering around the midfield again. Players running off him, players beating him. He's become very limited in his passing now as well, insofar as getting the ball off the back three and turning and starting attacks. And then Bruno Fernandes, he's a wonderful player, but you can't leave him in midfield too on his own. I mean, you look at the likes of, even look at the Bournemouth midfield and the attacking players, the pace, energy, the athleticism. You look at Chelsea's midfield. I watched that game against Crystal Palace. Like the pace and the athleticism of these midfielders now, and they've got 3 players in there, and they will find ways to get at Manchester United. So yes, it was an improved performance, but I still have massive doubts about this Manchester United side moving forward.
Yeah. You make a fair point about the analysts pouring over those performances as well, or that performance. Like the element of surprise is gone very, very soon.
Yeah.
Because Danny Murphy was making the point, I just read it on the BBC website, he was saying with Mbeumo and Cunha in particular, he felt that earned United a certain respect from Arsenal, that last year teams weren't scared of them up front, so they sort of just ran all over them. So he thinks that's going to make life much, much easier for them in general play. Maybe that's true to a point.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that'll put some manners on teams that are playing against Manchester United. Like I said, fullbacks might not be as adventurous. Teams might play with 2 number 6s just to screen those passes into those players in those pockets, right?
Yeah.
But teams will account for that, but then they'll recognise the weaknesses in Manchester United. They won't completely change their game, and they'll realise that there's huge spaces down the sides of that back 3. They'll realise that there's plenty of opportunity to get at Manchester United. Arsenal did not play well yesterday. I mean, there's no 2 ways about that. I suppose everybody's looking for judgment and looking for kind of, where Manchester United, Arsenal, Liverpool, where they're. We're 1 game in. I've played in enough opening days of the season to understand that they're a bit helter-skelter, and you can play as many preseason friendlies as you want. You can do as much game replica training in preseason, but nothing hits you like the first day of the season. I can promise you that. I mean, you're breathing heavy. You can't catch your second wind. Everybody's full of beans, everybody's full of energy, everybody wants to do well. So the games over the weekend, I thought, the games, like Liverpool and stuff, they get a little bit frayed around the edges, balls changing hands an awful lot. Nobody can really control the game. I say Arsenal didn't play well. I think, again, I don't want to, the caveat of this chat is I am aware it's the first game of the season, so you don't want to label anybody too soon or too early, but that Zubimendi in midfield, Arsenal didn't really have any control in terms of, the centre backs getting the ball into a defensive midfield player, him being able to take it under pressure and set up calm, sustained attacks for Arsenal, where they're moving the ball through the thirds, they're recycling possession. There was a helter-skelter nature to it. And Arsenal have lost Thomas Partey. And Thomas Partey, I thought, was brilliant at that. Like, he was one of the premier progressive passers in the league, or probably in world football, where the centre backs could fire that ball into Partey, even when he's under pressure, take it back foot and drive past the opposition number 10, who was designated to try and limit his influence in the game. He had that mobility, he had that skill set to do that. Obviously, they've lost him, so they brought in Zubimendi. I think Zubimendi looked like he got hit with a train yesterday. I mean, the pace of that game, the regularity with which the ball was changing hands. You think of the league that he's come from, where it's calm possession, everybody's building and trying to implement their rotations and things like that. And all of a sudden, that game is just crash bang wallop for him, and it just seemed to be happening so fast for him. Now everything will settle down over the next few weeks, and I'm sure he will be a good signing. But he couldn't get that ball. He was dropping in to try and get it off the centre backs, and all of a sudden, he was getting smashed. The ball was being hit over his head. They need to turn and pick up second balls. So there was a crash bang wallop nature to that game last night or yesterday. Sorry, and I think that suits Manchester United. You know, in the game, the ball is changing hands and everything seems to be happening from broken plays. I think United are very good at that. Bruno thrives in those types of environments where, you know, the ball is changing hands. All of a sudden it breaks to him and he picks a wonderful pass out. Fullback's 10 yards too far advanced for Arsenal. And United are thrive in those type of environments. I think once the season calms down and everybody settles in, we'll get a better picture. But my initial outlook was I think Arsenal might suffer unless Zubameni can get up to speed quickly. Because, you know, they're finding it hard to find Odegaard in those pockets, finding it hard to get sustained good service to Saka. Gyökeres was a bit of a non-runner in his opening game as well. Martinelli down that left-hand side. I mean, Arsenal really have to... I know they signed Noni Madueke. Don't know if he's the answer, but Martinelli isn't a huge threat down that left-hand side. Yes, he's good moments and stuff, but everybody knows that everything good from Arsenal comes down that right-hand side. So teams might tend to flood over and drift over, and flood that area. And then see what Martinelli can do. So listen, there's a lot of questions, a lot of things, you know, you get an early picture, but there's an awful lot more to learn over the next few weeks.
And finally, then you mentioned Altay Bayindir, the goalkeeper. Onana's been injured a lot of the pre-season, and it feels like a long time ago now, but obviously Onana had a very bad Europa League final, and then Bayindir played the last game of the season for United against Villa and has started this game. Amram defended him to the hilt afterwards, I guess, as a manager's going to do, you know, because the question came to Amram. He's conceded goals like this before, and Amram's eyes narrowed a bit and he honed in on the journalist. When was that? And so the Spurs game, when there was no VAR, and you know, he talked about games where he felt Bayindir was brilliant. All that said, it's a really bad mistake, no?
It is a bad mistake. One thing I can say for certain is when that team sheet came in at an hour and 15 minutes before the game and Arsenal saw that Bayindir was in goal, I can guarantee the set piece specialist or the set piece coach at Arsenal made some minor adjustments. And said, "Oh, hold on a minute, this guy's got form. He doesn't deal well with crosses. Let's send Saliba in there to see if he can, you know, unsettle him." Yes, it's a mistake. Yes, he has to be stronger. I could see that, but the access that Saliba got to the goalkeeper is scandalous for me. Now, Manchester United are not a big team. Euro and De Ligt are probably the only two, and they were on the 6-yard line trying to deal with the cross. So that left Mason Mount to deal with Saliba, which is a mismatch. Now, what I would say is that I've played in teams where goalkeepers have been bullied and threatened and stuff like that. When Saliba starts making a beeline for the goalkeeper, if you've got a big, burly centre-half or a strong midfield player, all of a sudden, like, the way to deal with that is to create a little bit of argy-bargy, to push into Saliba, to push him away from your goalkeeper, and Saliba pushes you back. And you know, the referee stops the taking of the corner, calls the two of you in, and says, "Hey, listen, lads, settle down." Well, that's you then saying to the referee, "He's trying to bully my goalkeeper, so can you be aware of that, please?" And even if he goes in again, keep pushing Saliba. You got to give your goalkeeper room to work. You got to give your goalkeeper space to come and punch that ball. Now, if he is susceptible to crosses, or to corners that are dropped in underneath the crossbar, everybody now knows that. So everybody knows is going to flood that area against him. I just feel that Manchester United could have given him a dig out, because for a goalkeeper who's not great at that, for Saliba to be given unrestricted access, and he didn't even have to do much. That's why he didn't have to foul him. He just kind of put his forearm into his ribs, which was enough to just to put him off. But he ragdolled Mason Mount and then just waltzed in front of the goalkeeper. And I don't care who you are, man. That is the difficult thing. William Saliba must be 6'4", 95 kilos, you know, well able to use his body. You know, you've got to give your goalkeeper some sort of protection. Now, I know that a lot of people are just flat out blaming Bayindir and saying it is his fault. But there was a similar incident in the second half where Raya, I think it was De Ligt, was trying to get into Raya, right? And Raya got that punch. And I remember thinking to myself, geez, that was very, very similar. But you look, it's Gabriel that's into De Ligt, and De Ligt doesn't make too much. Like, De Ligt never really gets hands on Raya, because Gabriel is absolutely pushing him in underneath the cross. So De Ligt doesn't have a free access to the goalkeeper, and it gives David Raya just that half a yard to work in, and he just catches the punch beautifully and adds it in. Binder didn't get that. Now, Manchester United probably aren't big enough. Maybe Casemiro probably would have been the next one in. But I know for a fact that if that happens the other way around, Gabriel Saliba, or even if I'm playing in a team and you see someone that's trying to bully your goalkeeper, you have to step in there and throw down a marker. You are not bullying my goalkeeper. Even if you have to grab Saliba and manhandle him, and even if he falls down on the floor, and the referee calls you guys in, all of a sudden the referee's attention has been drawn to it.
Yeah.
And when the referee's speaking to you, you're telling the referee, he's into my goalkeeper, he's stepping on my goalkeeper's toes, he can't do that. So 9 times out of 10 then, when that ball is in the air and Saliba goes near the goalkeeper, the whistle goes and you get a free out, right? So I think Manchester United set piece coach or whoever's involved in that probably has to take some responsibility. But again, he doesn't have the huge amount of players to sacrifice from that area, because remember, Arsenal have Calafiori, they have Declan Rice, they have Gabriel, and 1 or 2 other reasonably sized players that are going to crash that 6-yard line. So United need to protect that. They just don't have enough big players or enough physical players to go in and deal with that. So yes, it was Bayinder's fault, but I'm willing to cut him a little bit of slack insofar as William Saliba walking into you, and then when Bayinder gets off the ground, now you can't plant your feet because you're jumping, and all of a sudden that little forearm into the ribs is enough to just knock you offline and not be able to get a punch on it. But like I said, watch back the other one with De Ligt and Gabriel. De Ligt is like trying to get to the goalkeeper, and Gabriel is just manhandling him, and he just gives him that little bit of space to do his work. But Baynder obviously is a very, very good goalkeeper. He's a very good shot stopper. Manchester United clearly rate him highly, but he's not a perfect goalkeeper. He has a slight weakness, and now everybody knows what that weakness is. Well, everybody probably knew what it was from that Spurs game. So Manchester United have to realise that he's a brilliant goalkeeper. We really like him, but he has a slight weakness. So what do? We help him. We cover up those weaknesses so he's not as exposed as what he is. Because there's only very, very few goalkeepers in the world that are pretty much flawless, aren't they? Nearly every goalkeeper has some sort of an issue. So, if you do rate him and you do recognise that he has a weakness, then you have to help him too.
Yeah.
A, get better, but B, give him protection. And I just thought Mason Mount got absolutely ragdolled by Saliba and was just given too much access to the goalkeeper.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. It's more nuanced than just calling him a flapper. On Friday then, defending champions, Liverpool kicked off at Anfield. Heavy with emotion, actually, I guess.
Yeah.
You saw Salah's reaction at full time, even pre-game, actually. He's really feeling it, Jota's passing is still so fresh in the air for those players. 2-0 up, then 2-2, then 4-2 against Bournemouth. What do you say of Liverpool's opening night?
Well, the feeling around the training ground on Saturday morning would have been brilliant, because when you're 2-0 up and it gets to 2-2, you show that character to get wins over the line. You find a way to win games of football. And I suppose that ties into what I was saying earlier about Manchester United. They kind of find ways to not win games of football, and there's always a hard luck story attached to it. But good teams with good mentality and good players will find a way to get it over the line. And I was watching that game and I thought to myself, went to 2-2, it was 15 minutes left, and I thought to myself, I still fancy Liverpool here playing into the Kop end. I think they'll just apply enough pressure to Bournemouth, and something will give. So they can almost be the best wins insofar as when you win it late like that, or you win it with 2 late goals, it sets the tone for the season. There's a great feeling now going into next week and going into the games that are coming up, because you got to win over the line. But Arne Slot will be mildly concerned about the lack of discipline for Semenyo's breakaway goal. There was, I think it was 7 players maybe ahead of the ball. Wataru Endo went and Curtis Jones went, which Szoboszlai was the deepest lying one. He then has to recognise that my other 2 midfield players have gone. I'm the one that supports this from behind. I'm the one that stands as sentry in the middle of the pitch, and if the ball does turn over, I'm in a position to A, divert Bournemouth wide, so I'm standing in the middle of the pitch, or B, I might be able to foul someone and give away a foul and take a yellow card, and when we move on. But he gets a little bit giddy, and he goes to join in. And as soon as he joins in, it's a loose-ish pass from Mo Salah. It happens. You're still 80 yards from goal. But for one misplaced pass, to all of a sudden now, like, Semenyo is just running straight at the 2 centre-backs. We get that Liverpool are 2-0 up and enjoying themselves, and there's probably a raucous atmosphere in Anfield. But I think Endo needs to recognise that that's why he was brought onto the pitch, because he's your deep line 6. You're the one that supports that from 10 yards behind the play. And constantly, as you're moving forward and as the breakaway is happening, Your job as a six is to keep scanning, and your job is in your mind. You're saying to yourself, if we lose this ball, where are we weak? If we lose this ball, where are Bournemouth going to go with this?
Yeah.
And you kind of drift over to that side to where you're maybe most vulnerable. Listen, it's a negative job to have where you're constantly thinking like that, but that's your job as a defensive midfield player, is to just slow up a little bit, let the play develop ahead of you, give yourself 10, 15 yards to work in so you can get a good picture of where you're weak. But he got giddy and he realised, oh no, there's a breakaway here. I can go in and get a third goal. That's awful lack of discipline from Endo, to be fair. But having said that, Zabazlai should recognise that he has decided to go, and Curtis Jones is gone, and they just emptied the midfield.
Yeah.
And you could have drove two buses down the middle. So
Yeah, definitely susceptible on the counter, it felt like. But in general play, because it's interesting they've kind of put in Wirtz, who's more of an attacking player than a midfielder, and so curious to see how they look in general play. I know Jamie Carragher feels they look very open and have looked very open. That didn't jump out to me as this massive problem for them this year. Like small examples, there was one moment I just jotted it down on like 34, 35 minutes where McAllister plays a 1-2 with Wirtz and goes beyond the ball and they lose it. And Wirtz, to his credit, didn't say, oh, well, I'm not a midfielder. I don't have to do anything. He sprints back alongside Zabazlai and then again, buys time for McAllister to get back in, and they were in their shape and they were set. Like, I'm not seeing this thing that like Liverpool wide open. Whatever about those moments in the counter attack, for sure, they seem easy enough fixes.
yeah, I completely agree with that, Joey. I think that they got caught because they got giddy. They were 2-0 up and they got caught in the counter attack. But I agree with you. In general play, they had a really good shape about the midfield. Wirtz was obviously given that more free role. It was McAllister and Zabazlai. Zabazlai, as an attack-minded player, will always, if he sees a gap as a midfield player to run into, or he sees a window that I can maybe give an option to an attacking player, he's always going to take that. But McAllister is the one then that is a constant sitter. Now you have Gravenberch to come back
Yeah,
into that team as well, and he will fulfil that role. So I agree with you. There's 100%. Agree with you 100% that it did look really solid from Liverpool, and it was a decent performance. They weren't at their fluid best, like they didn't tear Bournemouth asunder. But it was a solid performance. I thought Wirtz did reasonably okay. Would probably like to see him involved in the game a little bit more.
yeah,
But it was Ekitike had a decent debut, getting a goal as well. But if they get Isak into that team, which looks, I would say it's nearly inevitable now, to be honest with you, that Newcastle will end up selling him. I know there's a lot of talk around Isak saying that Newcastle should just throw a marker down and not sell him, and you can't do that because
yeah,
you've got a £120 million asset, then you're just shooting yourself in the foot. I think Newcastle right now are probably, I'm sorry, just gone off topic a little bit. Newcastle are probably vastly looking for a replacement for Isak. That's why they want to maximise the price. I thought Kirk has had an interesting debut. Every time the camera panned to him, he looked to be out of breath. So I think I'm not sure what a pre-season he's
yeah.
had.
He
There
went.
was a couple of times.
He went off
Again,
after an hour. He went off after an hour. So that's real first day of the season kind of stuff.
oh man, like it's tough, but you don't know what his training schedule has been.
Yeah,
There's a couple of moments where he was late, he got booked. You could see him lunging, and he was never getting there. There's a couple of times where 1-2s were played around him, and I thought to myself, oh, interesting that. But I think he will get fitter as minutes go on. But I thought he had an interesting enough debut. But other than that, I think it's business as usual at Liverpool.
yeah.
Virgil van Dijk was superb.
I guess the other thing we're interested in was the right hand side, given it's been such a fulcrum for Liverpool for so long. So after his 23 touches in the Community Shield, and people saying, "Oh, that cliff, he's gone off it." Salah looked to be full of energy, full of running. Um, that relationship with him and Frimpong, how do you think that's going to work and develop?
Yeah, I think that there was such a familiarity between Trent and Salah that it was brilliant. Like Trent knew when he had to underlap. Trent knew when he was supposed to sit out, and when that ball comes back, he just whips it in first time. And obviously the deeper passes, those straight passes from right back over the opposition's left back, and Salah automatically just gets in. So they had a good understanding. Frimpong is much more of a dribbler, will travel with the ball, will want to get involved more often. But it's up to them to sort that out. I
Yeah,
mean, Frimpong will understand. They'll be talking in the training ground, when to leave me alone, when to play me in, when to put the balls in behind. But they'll develop that. I think Frimpong's a very good player. I think he played well on Friday night. I thought defensively he did really well. There was a couple of times there where the ball turned over and he was like a Tasmanian devil getting back. I mean, it was just straight line, and he looks quick as well. He wants to defend. So I think they'll be defensively better,
yeah.
obviously, on that right hand side. But they'll figure out a way. Good players always will.
He did one thing on 4 minutes, which I don't think Trent was in the habit of doing, which was a selfless on the overlap with no hope of getting the ball, and then Salah just
Yeah.
put it in shot. I think Mo will be okay with that situation. You keep doing that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, they develop. The good players will sit down, they'll talk after training, they'll watch some video clips back again. And Frimpong's job is to obviously have a good game himself, but to get Salah as much service ammunition as he needs. So they'll figure that one out.
Yeah. I did on the Saturday evening. I know you didn't see this game in full, so we don't have to drill too deeply into it. But I just think it is worth mentioning Wolves nil, Manchester City 4 on Saturday evening, because I definitely had a kind of a moment. Like, of course, the Empire was going to strike back. So they went with Trafford in goal. It was Lewis, Stones, Diaz at Newry, and then star of the show was Reindeers in midfield with Nico Gonzalez and Silva. And then Oscar Bob, of course, is back as well. Haaland looks really sharp. And Doku. And like they just steamrolled Wolves. Haaland with the opener, but it was all about the Reindeers dribble and scoop pass. Then he got the second. And it's like this really, you think first game of the season, you've come from Serie A. You mentioned Zubamendi, but like this really powerful, like kind of Steven Gerrard off the ball kind of run beyond Oscar Bob for his goal. Then the Haaland goal was all about Rangers, took the ball brilliantly from a Trafford kick out, played a 1-2 again, ran beyond the ball, little cutback and a goal. So, 27 years of age, Serie A midfielder of the year, kind of like, and surrounded by I was like, Jesus, like, why is no one tipping City? Like, I just suddenly thought, let's hang on a second here.
Yeah, listen, there was definitely I caught big chunks of that game or saw bits and pieces of it on the highlights there after as well. Like, I mean, you talk about a player coming into the division and, talking about Zubamendi or, players trying to find their feet, new signings, Gyökeres, Sesko. I mean, there's a guy that just came in day one and just went bang. I mean, it was an incredible performance, just the off the ball running, the relentless running in behind. And then as a technical ability, I thought the pullback or the little reverse pass for Haaland's second goal was awesome. For him to be running towards the corner flag and have the awareness just to pull that perfectly, and the ball almost stopped. So it couldn't have been any better. Like the weight on the pass was beautiful. Just stopped just before Haaland made contact, which allowed him to get the power that he did.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, Manchester City's midfield, without Gundogan, without Kovacic, Bernardo Silva is obviously still playing. You Ryan Cherky to come off the bench as well. I'm missing one more. Nico Gonzalez looks like he's going to get more minutes. Rodri, obviously, to come back into it. Phil Foden. So you're right. They've certainly rebuilt, and they do look good. But there was one thing I noticed in the first half was Stones and Diaz got two offsides. For one was a disallowed goal, and the other one I think Travers saved. Now sometimes when crosses come in the box, the centre forward goes early and he drifts offside, and he is offside. But if you look at the two offsides, the two centre backs, as soon as the ball went back before it got crossed back in, the two centre backs stepped up and they earned that offside. They won that offside. It wasn't a lucky one where the centre forward made a mistake and went a little bit too early.
Right.
John Stones for the defensive goal, and that tells me they're two centre backs that are bang in tune, that are really, really focused this year. John Stones obviously missed a lot of minutes last year with injury. Don't think Diaz had his best season. So I think that just those telltale signs in the first half an hour, that they're two centre backs that are really tuned into their job and really tuned into what they're supposed to be doing. And I thought Stones stepped up, because it's a brave thing to do, by the way. I mean, that is so brave. And that ball gets rolled back just before the cross comes in, just take two steps forward, because it goes against every natural instinct you have as a defender, because you're like, no, I'm going to stay in and I'm going to defend the cross. But then if the cross is perfect and it beats you, it's a goal. So you have to be so focused to be aware that the centre forward is just on your blind side, and your full back isn't going to play him on side. Just take those two steps forward. And the same for the Travers goal. So I think they'll be defensively an awful lot better this year. The squad looks rejuvenated. I think Gundogan, Kovacic, and Bernardo Silva, that midfield trio last year, looked tired, and they got ran over a lot. Cherky looked brilliant when he came in as well. And Haaland is obviously going to do Haaland things. He's going to guarantee a minimum 25 goals this season, which is always a help. But what signing Rangers looks to be. An incredible performance to go away from home with Wolves, and for him to deliver that. Yeah, listen, Man City will be thereabouts, no doubt.
The one caveat maybe is, from what I saw of the game, the pitch looked very big. because Wolves
Yeah.
were so spread out. And,
Mm,
you know, contrast with Thomas Frank, who played five at the back against PSG and then went four at
yeah.
the back at the weekend. Victor Pereira, the Wolves manager, steps out in front of the media. Your team has just played open and you've been beaten 4-0. And he said, "We played brave. We didn't try and defend. I don't believe in this kind of game." These
Mm.
managers are getting away with murder. I swear, this is unbelievable. This is not management.
Yeah, like there's two things there. The first thing there, really, though, is if you play Manchester City or Liverpool and you prepare in the week and you go to a flat back five and you basically say to your team, "We've got no chance of landing any blows here. We're just going to sit in a low block and try to defend." It's kind of the message you're sending to your team is almost like that. We're not good enough to compete with these guys, so we're going to drop off. So there's an overall message in the context of the season, because then the following week, if you all back up and play your game again, it's kind of mixed messages for players. So they'd almost suffer that and then have a positive message afterwards to say to your players, no, hey, listen, we're brave. We don't take step back from anybody. We play our football. And if we keep playing like this, we will finish top half of the table without doubt. Okay, we might have to suffer days like this. So I think there was an overall message there, kind of subliminal or subtle message behind the scenes. And I think second of all, the second point would be a lot of teams have tried that, but I think that big teams now are so good that you're pretty much just writing the game off. Because if you drop into a flat back five, low block, they'll get you eventually. You can say as well as Tottenham did against PSG, they got caught eventually. Because if you give up 70, 75, 80, 85% possession to these teams, they're going to break you. The players are too good. The attacking players now are too good. The managers are too good. The substitutions or the substitutes available to those managers are too good. There was a time maybe you could do it, but you'd want to be bloody good at it, to be honest with you. I mean, you want to be really, really well disciplined to maybe do something like that. But the good teams, the good players are just too good. They'll either get rid of shots from distance, because if you drop off, you will open yourself up to shots from distance, and they're so good that you're kind of hoping that they have a poor day. Or a clever player with a reverse pass or a clever run or something individual will get you open. So I think those managers are probably thinking along the context of the whole season now. They want their players to go down, but go down in a positive way. And so far, but we had a go and we tried. We just weren't good enough. But that's fine. We're going to do the same next week.
Yeah, not for
Does
me.
that answer adequately enough for you,
No,
Joe?
I look. I totally understand your point. It's a really interesting point. I just would find that infuriating if I played in that team. Like, if my manager comes to me and says, "We're playing City, we're playing PSG," like, I wouldn't take it personally that they're better than us, you know?
Mm.
And I
The
guarantee
other
you,
thing as
when,
well
when,
is,
when City get caught this year, it's not going to be from Wolves playing open, expansive football and they're going to be beaten 4-3. How City
mm,
are going to, how City and the big teams are going to slip up this year is when a team does get resolute and does play two banks and defends deep and hits them on the counter and gets a sucker punch, and it's a low scoring sport. You just need to score one and they get frustrated and the crowd get. That's how City will lose points this year. Wolves
yeah.
coming out playing like that. I mean, I'd say City were like beautiful, beautiful.
You got to look at you have to look at the makeup of Wolves' squad as well. Like, do
Yeah.
they have the players to go and do that? Do they have the players to drop into a low bank? Are they disciplined enough? Are their attack-minded fullbacks resolute enough to go in and do that? He probably looked at the squad and he went, "I haven't got those types of players."
Do it, maybe.
Whereas if you look at a team like Crystal Palace, who are defensively as resolute as
Mm,
you're going to get, they got Man City in the FA Cup final doing that,
yeah.
dropping into low block. But that squad is built for that. That squad is built for counter-attacking. When you look at the pace they have in it, with Mateta at the top end of the pitch, Eze, Munoz at right wing back. So they're built for that. And they do that every week, regardless of who they play against. They drop into a low block, get tight, get narrow. They've signed players that are really comfortable doing that. They've signed players that are really good at that. Look at Lacroix and Richards. Any crosses that come in the box, those guys go and win it. Mark Gahey, they're really good out and out defenders, and
Yeah.
then they're built for counter attack. So for Wolves to switch into that mode for 1 week of the season, they probably don't have those types of players. So the manager says, "Well, look, we're going to play our football, and if we get beat 4-0, we'll just take it on the chin and have to move on." Look how resolute Crystal Palace were against Chelsea, how difficult they are to break down. But they're built for that. And I don't think Wolves are. So I think if Wolves tried to replicate a Crystal Palace, they won't be as good at it. And Man City will probably beat you anyway. And there's a good chance they'll beat you 3-0. What you're saying there about, dropping into a low block and hoping that you beat Man City, you also need to account for Man City need to have an awful day. They need to have one of their really poor days where their shooting boots aren't on, or your goalkeeper has an absolute worldie. So if you to kind of throw your playbook out the window for 1 week, to the extent that you go from one extreme to the other in terms of what Wolves are trying to do versus what they should do, the managers probably just go, look, I'm going to just have an upbeat message and congratulate my player for being brave.
I get that. I
You know,
get that. And I don't want to labour the point. One last one. Are the players so one-dimensional that they can't, given the fitness, the strength, like you can't just dig in for a game here or there? Are they that like the
well, you
opposite of
could.
malleable? You know?
Well, you could, but I mean, if you're signing players that are, you know, I mean, if you sign if you buy a racehorse that normally runs 9, whatever, a mile, and then you put him into a 4 mile race, he's not built for that. He's not bred for that. And I think football players are the same. They're signing players for, Wolves only sign a specific type of player.
Yeah.
So if you ask him to do something, he might be able to do it. But if he switches off at any point, he's going to get caught out, and he's not built for that. He's not bred for that type of thing. Well, maybe they could do it, but the manager said it's a bit of a long shot anyway. So I'd rather just have a go, and we might get them on the break. And at least afterwards, then I have a positive message, and I
Yeah.
congratulate my players, and I can come in Monday morning and show clips of good things we did. The fact that we did have the ball in the net and we only got done by an offside. Because I think for the opening 35 minutes of that game, or the opening 40 minutes of that game, it was a reasonable game. I thought Wolves were kind of giving as good as they got. You just can't account for the moments of magic.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's the Rangers pass for the first goal, the flick. I mean, there's not many players in the world can do that. I mean, that is an incredible feat, right? So you're in a low block and you think you're in a good shape. And by the way, the quick feet to slip between the two midfield players. There's
Yeah.
not many players in world football can do that. The quick tap, get out the other side, and then to scoop a pass the way he did, to leave it on the money for the cross. I mean, low block or no low block, it's very hard to defend against that. And then once you go 1-0 down, the reverse pass from Rangers for the other one. So listen, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Ultimately, you're hoping Man City have an awful day or a really off day where there's not happening.
Yeah.
And I played in teams like that where I've dug in and defended, and they've hit the post, hit the crossbar. They've missed their XG is 5, and somehow we got a clean sheet. And then we scored with a set piece at the other end, and you win 1-0. So, but again, I played in a team that was bred for that.
Built for it. Yeah. No, very fair point. Just before we go, Keith Andrews and Brentford away to Forest lost 3-1. It's kind of striking even on the coverage when they came back from Andrews's interview pre-match before a ball had been kicked, and Dave Jones asked Roy Keane, fellow countryman, how's it going to go? And it's Andrew's misfortune that Keane is going to be there on these days, And, at one stage in a short enough answer, he says, look, he does talk a good game. He always has. Now he has to back it up. So, I mean, the scene was set, He wasn't pilloried at full time by any means, but it was 3-0 at the break. I guess you could say they won the second half, 3-1 at full time. Forest, to be fair, looked so fast and confident, and the stadium was up for it, and they played great intricate football. And Brentford were just almost like on the ropes, prone. It was that kind of a first half.
Yeah, well, it's what your initial point there about the pundits. I mean, Martin O'Neill must just be, in the long grass, just getting ready to pick his moment.
I don't even think he is. I think he's in the freshly cut lawn, standing there.
No. I don't think he's going to be as obvious to do it in the first week. He's just going to let the tension build, because I think everybody now is just waiting for Martin to appear.
But he did it during the summer. He was.
No, but now he's in the job and he's lost 3-1.
Oh well, yeah. But I think if anyone missed it during the summer, he was there with Simon Jordan and Jim White, who were just like looking at shooting each other looks as he was saying things like, "Look, Keith may find out there's more to football than corner kicks and taking tip-offs."
Yeah, listen. I don't know if Martin O'Neill is doing media this week, but he will appear at some point, and I'm sure that his one-liner will be absolutely scything, whatever he does decide to do it. But anyway, sorry, that's just a side. That's just a joke, a side point.
Yeah.
Listen, it's a tough ask. What Keith was probably hoping for was that any manager coming into a league, whether you've got 500 games behind you or none, it's difficult. But for Keith, his first managerial job, it's a huge ask. And I think what Brentford were hoping for is that the mechanisms were in place to support Keith, insofar as Brentford pride themselves on the structure that they have, with the the algorithm and stuff like that, and then the coaching staff that are in place to support them. So Keith really only has to look after his role, which is just the coach and minding the players. Everything else off the pitch is kind of done for him. Because for any manager to come in, because I've had managers that manage a whole football club, they do everything. They're in charge of scouting, they're in charge of analysis, they're across everything. I don't think there's too many managers do that anymore because that job is just so consuming. But it's going to be tough for Keith. It's going to be hard, especially after getting beat 3-1 away at Forest, and especially the manner of the goals in which went in. The first one was soft. It was a corner. There wasn't a whole lot of pace on it. The ball just breaks kindly for him. Chris Wood with a great finish. And then I think the pass into midfield was just, something that you didn't need. And you'll find out very quickly that one loose pass will invariably result in a goal at this level. But look, Brentford knew what they were doing. They're not going to panic. Keith will be given an ample amount of time. But he will need to start seeing results and some positive signs, because I didn't see the whole game. There didn't appear to be a whole lot of positivity in the first half. Second half, by all accounts, they were better and obviously got the goal. But a 3-0 Forest was taking the foot off the gas, so you can't read too much into that either. Yeah. But Keith just needs something positive, and if it's not a result, a performance where you can say, okay, we're competing, or we look a clean sheet or something like that. But he needs something positive in his next game. Otherwise, the pressure is just going to build and build. And for anybody, let alone a manager in their first job, to deal with that level of pressure, because your thought process goes out the window. When you're dealing with that level of pressure, I don't want to say you almost hallucinate, but when you're under that amount of pressure, you see things, or you focus on something that maybe isn't as important, or you get fixated on something because you're not thinking straight, you're not thinking clearly. And all of a sudden, then you start giving mixed messages to the players, and the players are going, well, hang on a minute. Well, last week you want us to do this, and now you want us to do this. You need consistency in your message as well. So that's the type of pressure I'm talking about. Training sessions. Do we give the players a day off? Do we get them in? Are they overtrained? Are they undertrained? All of a sudden, you start second guessing everything. And that's when you need a calm head, or you need calm heads around you. Keith is going to need a good support structure now, so that if he is fixating on something that maybe isn't as important as what Keith's making it out to be, because the pressure is distorting his view, then he needs a good backroom team around him, someone just that he trusts to say, hey, listen, I think you're over-egging this one, or you're maybe not paying enough attention to this area, just to steer him in the right direction. So I hope he has a good backroom team around him, and I hope he has a good support network, because he's going to need it over the next few weeks. But I hope something good happens. Like you said, clean sheet, a draw, really good performance, something that you can go, okay, a bit of positivity in the building, because it will be a dejected camp on Monday morning, not just because of the result, but also the fact that Thomas Frank went. It looks like Vissa's going to go, Mbuemo's gone, Norgaard's gone. It's a new squad. When you have someone like Norgaard or Mbuemo and you lose a game, you come in on Monday morning, you look around and you go, no, we got good players. We're okay. We're going to get to work this week, work hard, and we'll get a result on the weekend. When you got a lot of new players, you got a new captain in Nathan Collins now. It's up to him to manage the changing room, manage the mood in the changing room, get everybody focused for the following week. All of a sudden, a little bit of kind of uncertainty creeps in. And then that's where you need a really strong manager. So if you've got kind of a new team, a new squad, you've lost a core group of leaders, that's where you want a really strong manager to come in and say, hey, listen, I got this. I know what I'm doing. This is our plan for the week. This is what went wrong. This is what we're going to do next week. Which tall order for Keith. So you got, a new captain, new set of players, a lot of experience going to the team, and then an inexperienced manager.
Yeah.
So that can come off the rails very, very quickly. So as I said, I hope Keith has a good support network around him. And he gets some positivity next week.
Yeah, okay. Just before you go, can be quick as you like. Chelsea Palace, any quick takeaways on that one?
Not really. I just think Palace, you wouldn't take that one to heart, because that's what Crystal Palace do. They sit back, soak up pressure, defend their goal really, really well. They've got a really good back three, a super goalkeeper, and then they can counter-attack you. So you always, like when you play against Crystal Palace, you always have to be mindful of that counter-attack. Similar to what I was saying about Liverpool, when you're committing bodies forward, because when you're playing against a low block, the tendency is, well, your fullbacks will go 10 yards further higher. All of a sudden, 3 midfield players go instead of just the 2. And that's where Crystal Palace get you, because you've got Eze floating around the edge of the box. And when that ball gets cleared, it goes into him. All of a sudden, he swings one blind around the corner, over the top into Mateta, and you find yourself 1-0 down. So I think you always have to play against Crystal Palace with a level of caution. You can't commit too many bodies forward. You can't get too giddy. You can't lose the run of yourself insofar as one of your centre-backs decides to go on a mazy run. because they're the moments that Crystal Palace wait for. They're the ones where, you know, the centre backs see that they've overcommitted bodies. So I think Chelsea would be disappointed to win the game, but they're not going to cry over it because, you know, they could quite easily have lost that 1 or 2-0 with the weapons that Crystal Palace have. So I think Chelsea are going to be really strong this year. They probably need another centre back just to cover Levi Colwill. The goalkeeper might be an issue for them. I know the goal got disallowed when Mark Gahey cleared out the wall, but Jesus, that still shouldn't go in. I mean, that is pretty much straight down the middle. And he, you know, even if he doesn't see it late, it was within his wingspan, if you know what I mean, which means, you know, he should get something on that. You know, the ball wasn't moving that much in the air, and something that close, he should get it. So that would be a concern. I know everybody already had concerns over that goalkeeper anyway, and they got away with one there with that free kick. I wouldn't be surprised to see Chelsea sign a goalkeeper, and then that kind of would complete their squad. I don't know if I haven't seen anything in the media about goalkeepers at Chelsea. Maybe another centre back. I think they could do worse to take back Mark Gahey off Crystal Palace. He's out of contract next year, so he's one that might go. I know Liverpool are looking at him as well. But I think Chelsea probably need to sign a top class centre back, just cover Levi Colwill and maybe a goalkeeper. And I think Chelsea will go very, very close this year. I've no doubt about that.
Okay, listen, brilliant. We'll catch you up in a couple of weeks. Damien Delaney,
Brilliant.
thanks so much,
Thanks,
man.
Joe.
Cheers.
Thanks.